Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome yet again to another episode of Lunch Guide. I know you can notice a difference at the back from the previous show. We definitely have been moving a little steps further, and we're definitely looking forward to bringing some beautiful things with this brand new season. So I'm going to be taking this opportunity first of all to introduce the dish that we're going to be making today. We're going to be making two different dishes from some potatoes. I'm using very local potatoes, so we're going to be making some potato lollipops, and I'm going to be showing you how to make some very simple potato fingers. So before we get to that part, I'm going to start off by introducing the ingredients we're going to be working with today. And from the front, I'm going to start with some oregano, some cumin powder, some paprika powder, and some sage at the end. I've also got some mixed herbs, some turmeric powder there, some garlic powder, and some thyme. I've also got some chopped chives there, a bit of some sliced jalapeno chilies, just about a tablespoon of ketchup. This you're going to use later on for serving. I've also got a bowl there of some beautifully chopped red onions, a bit of flour, and some breadcrumbs that we're going to be using to coat our fingers. I've also got some mashed potatoes here that is now cool enough to be able to work with. We're also going to be using some beautiful fresh coriander at the back. And last but not least, a bit of some fresh lettuce to plate. We're going to take a short break now and give you a chance to grab your pens and papers if you're taking notes. And when we come back, we're just going to dive right into it. So please don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who missed out on what we're doing on this particular episode today, we're going to be doing some very simple handy dishes that will come especially handy in this particular season where you've got your kids coming home for the holidays and you're looking at some nice, quick and easy dishes to make for a very simple and hearty lunch. We're going to be making some potato fingers and potato lollipops. So first reminder for this particular recipe, if you're going to be trying this for lunch today, I do recommend that you parboil your potatoes. Do that in advance, mash them if you possibly can, and allow them to cool, because you will actually need your potatoes very cold for this particular recipe. So before we jump on, I'm also going to remind you that there is a bit of oil to my left hand side there, the big pot. You will actually need a bit of oil to start heating up before the process. And this will just allow you to really work right through even when getting to the last bit of cooking your dish. So we're going to start off very simply. We're going to start mixing up some of the ingredients we're going to be using for our chicken for our chicken finger. And for that, we're going to be needing some very beautifully mashed potatoes. So as you can see, this is just plain mashed potatoes, no seasoning at all in there. All I did was just mash it really finely and just roll them on using the help of my chopping board. And you can manage to do this very simply at home. So you're going to be needing about maybe 2 or 3 pieces of those to a serving. So this I'm actually just going to be doing for your reference for this particular reason. So from there, we're going to now start off by mixing some of our ingredients. And we're going to start off quickly by adding first our onions. So just some roughly chopped onions. We're also going to be adding into that a bit of some chopped chives. And then always very important to remember to season everything before you start mixing. So I'm going to start off with my seasoning. So I'm going to go in first with some oregano and some mixed herbs. And then just to give it that pungency and heat and flavor as well, we're going to go in with a bit of cumin, a bit of paprika powder, and a bit of cayenne. So very small amount of those. And something also to mention, if you are serving this to kids below the age of 8, I do recommend that you avoid using any of the hot spices, because it could actually be very hard for your kids to enjoy the dish. So next up, just very simply using a spoon, we're just going to mix those up. Give it a nice rough mixture. And then to that, we're also going to be incorporating some of our garlic powder. So just about a 1/4 teaspoon of that. And then we're going to add just a bit of our flour. So just about a handful or about half a tablespoon. And I'm also going to add just a small amount as well of some breadcrumbs. Remember, this is actually going to help you really keep the character of that potato together, and it will actually help everything to hold on together. So we're just going to mix that, making sure to coat your onions with the flour. Particularly for this purpose, we like to do this in advance to make sure that your onions don't really release any of the juices that they contain. So this actually gives you a nice, beautiful, dry rub kind of a mixture. So once that's done, very simply grab your potatoes. And we're just going to scoop just a little bit of that into the bowl and just proceed to mix everything together. I like to start off firstly with a spoon. It makes it a little easier to break down your mashed potatoes. And once that is complete, we're now going to turn over to working with our hands. So very, very simple. Just lay the bowl right next to you. You can actually work with your potatoes right straight from the fridge to the table if you're going to be making your potatoes in advance. And it will actually give you a bit of time to save yourself stress when doing it right at the end of the process. So very, very simply, just grab some flour. Begin by dusting your hands lightly. And now all you're going to do is proceed to portioning out your balls. I would recommend start off by putting just a little bit, about a heaped tablespoon on your hands. And all you're going to do now is, using the palm of your hands, you're going to proceed to squeeze out any air pockets that are in there. And remember, this is actually very handy, particularly for the fact that you do want your potato balls to really hold shape. So very important to give them a nice gentle squeeze before you begin, just to make sure you don't have any air pockets in there. And then lastly, just finish off by just rolling them on the palm of your hands until you achieve something just about that size, about the size of a regular meatball. And we're just going to continue doing the same. Now, something particularly I like about this recipe, it is something I have done occasionally for some of my personal guests or even for my family. And one thing I like about them is they really, really help you to conserve a lot of waste that's in your fridge. So you may have some potatoes that you may not be planning to use for any purpose. This is a very good technique to do so. And you can actually incorporate the same recipe using rice. If you do have some leftover rice, you may actually just add a bit of egg, which will help it to hold shape and to hold its structure. But for potatoes, they really do a good job just on their own. So we're just going to proceed to finish off our mixture in the bowl there. So I've used about 3 large potatoes, so that should give you about 5 to 6 pieces. A recommended serving portion for this should be maybe 2 to 3 for your kids, so this would be very good, and maybe even a little more for the adults. So we're just going to finish rolling those up. And then remember also something also to always very much pay attention to when you're doing any kind of meatballs. Particularly, your recipe has to really be able to hold shape before it goes into the oil. Remember, if you notice that your potato balls or your meatballs or your rice balls for any reason start to break before they hit the oil, it could be a sign that your whole mixture will fall apart once it goes into the hot oil. So do pay attention to actually getting the consistency right at this particular stage. So I'm just going to finish off that last piece. You can actually dust your hands a little bit once the mixture is a little sticky. And then just proceed to squeeze out that excess air once more. Finish it by rolling it off the tip of the palm of your hands. And just finish that off with the tip of your fingers. And that is now ready to go into the oil. So just a quick rinse of your hands before you proceed. Very important to keep clean when working, especially for hygiene purposes. And now from there, very, very simply, we've got some oil that's already been heating on the side here. And all we are going to do now is proceed to add this to the oil. One particular thing to make sure as well, always make sure your oil is not too hot. Remember, you should actually be able to see just a bit of smoke coming from your pan, and not too much. If you do notice that the smoke really becomes a bit of a problem, you can actually turn off your gas and allow the oil to come down to a more stable temperature to work with. And also very important to make sure, if you're going to be working with hot oil, very important that you take some precaution. Wear an apron, keep your kids away from the kitchen, especially if they're really small, and if especially they don't know the hazards of hot oil. So we're just going to go straight into it. I will also share a small tip that I like to use before frying anything in the oil. Always take just a small pinch of flour, pour that right over your pot, and it starts to sizzle, then you're actually ready to go. So from this particular stage, very simply, I'm just going to grab the balls, and something also very handy that you can actually pick from this particular step. I personally like to do my balls on their own as they are, and then finish by just adding a skewer to them just for presentation. So it doesn't really hurt if you add your skewers now or later, but I do recommend that if it's just for presentation purposes, you can actually just soak your skewers in a bit of water before you begin to plate them much later on. It will allow the skewers to really slide off the balls really well. But please remember not to use the wet skewer in the oil, because the water and the oil will actually react and it may cause a fire. So very, very simply, just before going into the oil, just grab one of your bowls. Be sure to just toss it lightly inside one of the bowls with the breadcrumbs. That should give it a nice, beautiful finish. Then the breadcrumbs do really give a nice golden color once they're cooked. So just simply from there, proceed to transfer that into your oil and begin to do the same with the rest of your pieces. Alternatives for this particular recipe, if you're looking at something really spicy, you can actually add a bit of chili mixture into your potato mixture. If you're looking at something very, very much healthier, then I would also recommend you can actually just bake them instead of frying them. They will actually be a little more of a healthier option for those of you who are not really keen on eating fried food. It's a very, very important tip. And also be very sure when you're doing your balls, always try to give your pot a bit of space. Make sure not to overflood your pot of oil with the potato balls. Remember, they cook really well and they cook better when they actually cook in a nice big pot. So you can use the biggest pot you may have, or a deep fryer if you own one. All right, so while those continue, we're just going to pay attention to them. I'm going to be using a pair of tongs to move those around. And all you're going to do now is just toss them around. And at this point, I can actually just turn my oil off completely, because it actually has gotten to its prime. And it's quite hot now. It should be about 160 to 170 when you begin. If it's a little hotter than that, if you do have a probe to check, you should be doing this anywhere between 160 to 170. You should actually have a very, very good result. So we're just going to continue tossing those in the oil. And at this stage, very important to always have something to drain your potato balls in. So I'm just using a strainer here that I've improvised, and I'm going to use some serviettes or some kitchen paper in there. So this will be able to drain most of that oil. And remember, your potatoes were already pre-cooked. So remember, this is just a nice quick finishing process for them. And we're just going to proceed to remove them once they're nicely brown on the outside. Be sure to also lift them really gently to avoid them from breaking up when serving. And you can actually now really get that beautiful cumin smell in there. You can actually be able to get those beautiful paprika hints and the cayenne. And now your potato balls, if I can be able to show those to you from the camera there, you can be able to see it's got a nice beautiful finish and color to them. And as I said, you are looking for a nice beautiful finish. So very importantly, do not forget to really press your balls before they go into the oil. It will actually show more for your work right at the end of it. So we're going to allow this to just sit on the side and cool off slightly. And while that cools, I'm going to now go into the second process where I'm going to be showing you how to do the potato fingers. So very simple. Very, very similar to the previous technique. So I'm just going to now show you just the last and final process of finishing those off. So remember, these were particularly done in advance, so you can actually do these and leave them in the refrigerator, pull them out and allow them to come to room temperature before you continue to fry. And once you're ready to go, once your oil is hot, you can proceed to add them into your oil. So for this particularly, I'm going to do them without any breadcrumb or any flour because it was already mixed into the potato mixture earlier. And now we're just going to proceed to drop those into the hot oil. And now that your oil is slightly cooler, I've actually particularly taken the chance to turn that off. I did get a comment from one of the viewers about how to coordinate frying a lot of food or frying any particular food for that matter and trying to regulate your oil. I particularly like to turn the oil off for a few seconds and then I'm just going to turn it back on. And this particularly helps your oil in two ways. It helps you from really darkening your oil from burning it, and it does actually help you to really maintain that beautiful temperature that you need for your potatoes. So I'm just going to use my tongs now to just turn those while they fry. And this should actually be able to cook now in there for about anything between 5 to 10 minutes. It may cook faster or slower depending on the temperature of your oil. But very, very importantly, one thing to pay attention to is make sure your oil is not too hot because it may over brown your potatoes. Make sure it's not also too cool because it may actually start boiling your potatoes instead of frying and everything will actually fall apart. So if you can be able to see that from the cameras, that's now frying away really nicely. We're going to allow that to continue undisturbed, giving me a bit of time to clear up our station. And next up, we're going to be just chopping up a bit of herbs that we're going to be using just for the garnishing of the dish. So I'm just going to take a small handful of my coriander. And I'm just going to start by chopping that really, really finely. So remember to always have a sharp knife for this particular stage. And then just proceed to chop about a tablespoon of that as fine as you possibly can. And you can reserve the rest. We're also going to be using some lettuce to plate. So I'm actually using some iceberg lettuce. You're not restricted to using this particular type of lettuce, but one particular reason for using this, I like it particularly for the reason that it's very, very beautiful on the plate, and it does give your plate quite a bit of accent when you're actually plating. So that you'll be able to see right at the last part of the show. But before that, we're going to take a short break. I'm going to allow those to continue cooking. And when we come back, I'm going to take you through the last simple and final process, which is all about plating and making it really look like it was worth the while when you made it. So please don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who are with us just before we took a break, we were just finishing off the potato fingers that we were doing. And just before that, we were doing some potato lollipops. And now we're right at the last and final stage. We're just about to plate them. I will remember to mention it to all of you that you can actually alternate some of the ingredients for the recipe we've used today with some of your own. But do actually do a bit of research for most of them. As I mentioned as well, if you are going to be serving this to kids, you may actually be a bit lenient to the chili and with the pepper powders. But if you're actually going to be serving them to adults, you should actually have no issue with the recipe whatsoever. So we're now going to go into the last and final stage of plating. And for that, I've got some beautiful iceberg lettuce here. Now we're just going to start very simply by just breaking the stalks. And we're just going to place those right on the center of our plate, just like that. And now just to finish off the potato lollipops, which I'll be plating first, very, very simple. These have now been draining in the oil, so they should be now ready to come out. And now for that, you'll only need a bit of a skewer. So I'm using just regular skewers. You can be able to find this at any regular outlet or any retail shop around you. And you can actually be able to alternate this with using maybe some stalks or some cleaned branches from rosemary. Also a very, very good addition to the plating. But very simply, we're just going to go straight and plate as we are. So I'm just going to start off by just piercing the potato ball right over the top. And I'll just move those right onto the plate like that. And proceed to do the same for the other piece. So just stick right through the center, and then just remember to lift that with a pair of tongs. An alternative to that, you can actually just serve your potato balls on their own as they are. So I'm just going to serve the other two pieces onto the plate as well. So very, very simple. And to that, we're going to just lightly season it over the top with a bit of salt. And we also have some chopped jalapeno chilies there, so you can actually just place those right over the top of your potato balls. And those are actually very, very good additions to any dish, particularly for the fact that they're not hot, they're actually pickled, and they're very, very tasty. And then we're also going to plate the potato fingers. So these are just cooked as simple as that. You can alternatively decide to serve them as they are, or you can actually use the skewers. So we're just going to plate them just the way they are. So just move those straight onto your plate. Just slide that right over the top like that. And you can now just grab some of that ketchup that you reserved earlier for the plating. And you can just place a dollop on the plate like that. And you can actually also alternatively use the chilies. You can just place those on the side, and that will work to be a very, very simple and easy dish for you and your family to enjoy. Alternatively, you can also have a bit of some chopped coriander, which I like to just sprinkle right over the top for a bit of color and freshness. And your potato lollipops and your potato fingers are now ready to serve and be consumed as they are. I will take this time to thank you once again for tuning into the show. Remember, if you do have any questions pertaining these two dishes that we've done today that may have not been answered on this particular episode, you can take the opportunity to write to us, leave your message on our Facebook page, and we'll be definitely looking forward to hearing from you. So thank you once again for tuning in, and until the next episode, my name is Chef Andy, and I bid you farewell. See you.